My name is Luis Espinosa, and I'm the Director for the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis. As we continue talking about the liturgy of the Word, we're now going to mention two things that take place before the Gospel. And so the first one is that Gospel acclamation. And so we find the numbers 62, 63 in the general instruction that refer and help us understand and tell us what the Gospel acclamation is for. And so in 62, we begin by reading that after the reading that immediately precedes the Gospel, the Alleluia or another chant laid down by the rubrics is sung as the liturgical time requires. And it says, an acclamation of this kind constitutes a rite or act in itself, by which a gathering of the faithful welcomes and greets the Lord who is about to speak to them in the gospel and profess their faith by means of the chant. So usually what is our practice? Usually we start singing the Alleluia and we stand. In the previous episode, I mentioned briefly about the procession that is usually had as we're singing the Alleluia. And after the Alleluia is sung, there is a verse that is sung, and then the people respond again with the Alleluia. But now we get a little bit more clarity and more specifics as to what happens when we are not in those liturgical times, or when we are in Lent, when we don't or should not be singing the Alleluia. So this is where 62, letter A, B, talk about what to do. So in letter A, it tells us that the Alleluia is sung in every time of the year other than Lent. The verses are taken from the Lectionary or from the Graduale. Then letter B tells us about what to do in Lent. So it says during Lent, instead of the Alleluia, the verse before the Gospel, as given in the Lectionary, is sung. It is also possible to sing another psalm or tract as found in the Graduale. So here we're given the options of what to do outside or during when we are in the season of Lent. So number 63 continues to help us, give us some guidance as to this acclamation before the Gospel or the Gospel acclamation. It says when there is only one reading before the Gospel, so especially when we're celebrating a ferial day or a Mass during the week or a memorial, it says when there is only one reading before the Gospel. So first we make the distinction. During the time of year when the Alleluia is prescribed, either an Alleluia psalm or the responsorial psalm followed by the Alleluia with its verse may be used. Then B, during a time of the year when the Alleluia is not foreseen, either the psalm and the verse before the Gospel or the psalm alone may be used. Then we give another distinction in letter C. The Alleluia or the verse before the Gospel, if not sung, may be omitted. So if the Alleluia or the verse before the Gospel is not sung, it may be omitted. So it's possible for there to be silence, for there to be no acclamation after the second reading or after the psalm, if the Alleluia is not sung. And so what would happen is that we would not hear the Alleluia, we would not hear that verse, and we would immediately begin with the Gospel, with that dialogue between the deacon and the people or the assembly, or the priest and the assembly if the deacon is not available. So again, it's very important to know this, is that, we should be singing the Alleluia. There should be a verse as part of the Alleluia. And during the season of Lent, instead of the Alleluia, it's the verse before the Gospel. Then I do want to take some time to talk more about another piece that we may find, and that is called the sequence. Before Vatican II, we used to have several sequences that were sung that were sung after the Alleluia, after the Gospel Acclamation. Again, this is before the reform of the liturgy, before Vatican II. So, in special feast days, we would additionally hear another hymn or chant done before the Gospel. After the 2002 Roman Missal, we see that there was a change and adaptation made for us, especially in the United States, is that instead of after the Gospel Acclamation, after the Alleluia, instead the sequence was placed before the Alleluia. So when we talk about a posture for the sequence, if the sequence is being used, the sequence is done after the second reading, before the Gospel Acclamation. And so number 64 of the general instruction tells us the following. The sequence, which except on Easter Sunday and Pentecost Day is optional, is sung before the Alleluia. So when we talk about the sequence is usually a chant or a hymn that corresponds to that feast day. What is our experience now? That we would normally hear, that normally it would be sung, especially on Easter Sunday, on Pentecost Sunday, but that we also can have it sung during the octave of Easter, for Corpus Christi, and for the celebration of Our Lady of Sorrows. So these are other moments that we could hear the sequence being sung. And that before the Reform, we had many other celebrations that had their own sequences. But that for us, now, it is required that we cannot omit the sequence on Easter Sunday and Pentecost Day or Pentecost Sunday. So these 2 days are days where we are required to sing the sequence before we sing the Alleluia. And that again, by practice, we may experience or hear the sequence being sung on Corpus Christi or on the celebration of the most holy body and blood of our Lord and Our Lady of Sorrows. So those are 4 possibilities that we can experience throughout the liturgical year. So remembering the Gospel Acclamation ideally is sung, the Alleluia is sung. If it's not sung, it is to be omitted, and that the sequence is a chant or hymn that takes place before the Alleluia, especially when we are celebrating the feasts of Easter Sunday, Pentecost Sunday.